So it's always a good idea to save work. So let's go to File and Save. And I'll specify my location right here, and I'll use name abstract factory visitor to save this diagram. So iFactory visitor is an interface to concrete factories of concrete visitors. So we definitely need the method right here, right? So we can just go to the properties and add a method that is named create visitor. Of course, create visitor is an abstract method, and it's always public. So this is why we don't specify here that it's public. So you don't really even have to say plus create visitor. And this create visitor method returns back a visitor, right? So this is where we indicate the return type of this operation, visitor, right? So visitor can be created by this method declared in our interface. So now finally we need to have concrete object factories, a class that creates return, that creates and returns a new visitor shopper, and also the visitor emergency. So let's create these. So visitor shopper factory will be a new class. We can specify it here and name it factory visitor shopper. Of course, in software you cannot use spaces, but it's permissible to do this in diagrams and insert spaces in names of our classes right here. And of course, this class will implement this interface. So we use implements interface type of relationship here, and this is how we do it. Okay, so this is a punctured line similar to inheritance, but this is interface implementation. So this is factory visitor shopper. Of course, because this is interface implementation, it has to provide create visitor method so that our simulation scenario can basically through this interface invoke this method inside the factory visitor. But normally with interfaces it should be obvious that this class is required to implement all of these interface methods, so therefore we don't have to even bother repeating these methods in the class that implements this interface. So factory visitor emergency will be the second concrete factory that we will have in our system. So again, I'm switching to the class and clicking here, and let's name it factory visitor emergency. So this is a second abstract factory that we can have in our system. And once again, we'll use the same implements interface relationship and make this connection right here, and let's arrange everything so that it's readable as much as possible. So I'm just going to reduce the zoom level a little bit here. So these are the two concrete factories that I have in my system, and of course simulation scenario needs the supply of visitor shoppers and visitor emergencies depending on the simulation scenario implementation, and it's going to use interface to the base class visitor, and it's going to use right here reference to the factory interface, and the factory interface is implemented by these two classes. One other possibility is that later other convenient object creation operations may be added to the factories. So for instance, we just use the interface here, and we can add another method, another override for create visitor. And this method could take reference to the entire list of visitors, right? Create visitor that will take visitor list and populate this list with visitors. So that's another possibility. So we can have multiple creation methods in these interfaces when we work with the factory or abstract factory design pattern. So our class structure supports extensibility. So later we can add new visitor types, by the way. So we can, for instance, have visitors of type employee in the system. So we can basically add more classes right here, right? And we can add right here as an example the class name visitor employee. Okay, and we can add another class later on, which will be maybe security staff. Okay, so that's another example of a visitor in the building. So we can have different sorts of visitors if we want to run our simulations. And of course, these classes will be inheriting from the visitor class like this. Okay, and we can of course rearrange it to make it all as readable as possible in our diagrams, maybe like this. Okay, so we have our inheritance for us for arrangement of this, and without much changes right here in the simulation scenario, of course we can create the corresponding factories. So the factory will be for the employees and the factory will be for the security staff. So here we can add the corresponding classes which will be implementing this abstract factory interface right here and right here, just like we started. And so this demonstrates, this idea demonstrates all this extensibility that is built into our set of classes and interface for the factory. So right here, this will be, of course, basically a factory for visitor employee, for example. Right, so right here, this will be a factory visitor employee, and this will be a factory named visitor security staff. Right, so we can, for the security staff, we can add the corresponding factory for the visitor security staff. Okay, so these are kind of lengthy names, but it's okay because it's just by nature we need to have descriptive names of our classes. I'm just trying to keep everything arranged in this as readable as possible format. So, but this is an idea. So you need to, if we need to extend our business objects by adding new visitors that could participate in the simulation scenario using the abstract factory interface, we can add concrete factories that can be used to generate this type of object supply. All that we do inside the simulation scenario, we create the necessary factory, and we can start calling, we can then set factory, call the set factory method, and then we can create visitors to populate the scenario visitor list with the visitors of the required type.